Katie, do you start us out? Because we're in a new session, or?
I'm happy to. I have your charge pulled up, so I can pull it up on the screen if you like and walk you through it quickly.
Well, I guess first we need to, I will, this is June 30th, 2021. This is the first of what will be several summer and fall meetings of the Child Protection Oversight Committee. Before we, does it make sense to go through the charge before we transfer leadership?
It's up to you, but the charge does cover how leadership transfers. Okay.
Katie, take it away.
Okay. Katie McGlynn, Office of Legislative Counsel. I will pull up the document. Gosh, 1 month away and I'm out of practice. Now I will pull up the document. Okay. So this is from the 2015 Act 60 and Section 23, created the Joint Legislative Child Protection Oversight Committee. This piece of legislation was amended in 2018. So the charge has changed and the date has changed. But as you know, the membership of this committee is 3 members of both bodies, not all from the same political party, and the duties of the committee are in subsection C. The committee is to exercise oversight over Vermont's system for protecting children from abuse and neglect, including evaluating whether the branches, departments, and agencies and persons that are responsible for protecting children from abuse and neglect are effective, determining if there are deficiencies in the system and the causes of those deficiencies, evaluating which programs are the most cost effective, and determining whether there is variation in policies, procedures, practices, and outcomes between different areas of the state and the causes and results of such variation. This subdivision 5, 6, and this subdivision B have been repealed in the 2018 legislation, so I will skip right over those. In terms of a work product from the committee, subdivision 2 states that the committee may review and make recommendations to the appropriations committees regarding budget proposals and appropriations relating to protecting children from abuse and neglect. You have the assistance of the Office of Legislative Counsel. There's language in this legislation in subsection E about retaliation, that there cannot be retaliation against any person who testifies before this committee. And then in terms of meetings, subdivision F2 is the language I just alluded to about transition of power. So the committee is to select a chair, vice chair, and a clerk from among its members and may adopt rules of procedure. And the chair is to rotate biennially between the House and the Senate members. So previously, the last biennium, it was with the House, so it would move to this now. And a quorum is to consist of 5 members. When the General Assembly is in session, the committee can meet at the call of the chair. During adjournment, the committee can meet up to 6 times, or it could meet more often, subject to the approval of the speaker and the pro tem. Subsection G covers reimbursement, and then subsection 8 covers sunset date of this committee. This has been amended by the 2018 legislation. So this committee is now set to sunset on June 1st, 2022. And that's it for the charge.
Thank you, Katie. As the outgoing chair, I would like to nominate Senator Lyons to be the new chair of the Child Protection Oversight Committee.
I would second that.
I'll accept the nomination.
Okay. Katie, could you tell us to vote yes or no?
Sure. All in favor of Senator Lyons as chair, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, Senator Lyons is our chair.
Senator Chair is now Senator Lyons. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Ann and Dick. I appreciate it. But so we've accomplished a great deal in the past, and I do want to say thank you to Senator Sears and Representative Pugh for their continuing work in this area. I mean, the work that you've done is absolutely outstanding, and I know that we'll be able to continue protecting children of the state as a result. So I think before we begin, it would be helpful just to have folks go around and introduce themselves, everyone who's here. I do see some new people, at least the new Deputy Commissioner is here. So why don't we go around and introduce ourselves? And I'm Senator Jenny Lyons from Chittenden County. And Katie, you're next.
Katie McGlynn, Office of Legislative Counsel.
Kelly.
Representative Kelly Payala from Londonderry, representing Londonderry, Weston, Stratton, Jamaica, and Winhall.
Ann. Pugh.
Representative Ann Pugh, representing South Burlington.
Kim.
Representative Kimberly Jessup, representing East Montpelier and Middlesex.
Eric.
Eric Fitzpatrick with the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Rich.
Rich Westman. I'm the senator from Lamoille.
Dick.
Dick Sears, State Senator, Pennington County and Wilmington.
Steve.
I am Steve Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association.
Brian.
Judge Grierson, Chief Superior Trial Court Judge. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you.
Erica. Up. Not. Sean. Oh, there's Erica. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Sean Brown, Commissioner for the Vermont Department for Children and Families. It's good to see everyone today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm
Erica
Erica Radke, Deputy Commissioner for the Financial Services Division. It's good to be here.
Evan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Evan Meenan, and I work in the Executive Director's Office of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs.
And Judy. Judith Rex.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we'll
Judy
hear
Rex,
from her.
Director of,
Oh, here she is. Okay.
yeah, sorry. Couldn't get myself unmuted. Judy Rex, I'm the Director of Policy and Planning for DCF.
Okay. And now that we've introduced everyone, the next order of business, as I'm reminded by our efficient and Ledge Council, is we need to elect a vice chair as well as a clerk. So the nominations are now open for vice chair. And Katie, can you remind us, does that vice chair rotate by House and Senate, or is that open?
The legislation doesn't specify. It just says that the chair rotates between the bodies.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to
All right,
nominate
so-
Representative Pugh, if I could,
I'll second that.
as vice chair.
All right, are there other nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor of voting for Representative Ann Pugh as vice chair, please say aye. Raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and now the floor is open for nominations for clerk. And the clerk's job is significant since he or she will be taking copious notes and writing all the minutes. And no, I'm just, but it is important to have a clerk, particularly for votes and keeping a record of the votes along with Peggy and our Ledge Council. So the nominations are now open for clerk. Okay. Hearing no nominations, I will put forward the name of Representative Kelly Pahala. Sorry, Kelly.
I
I'll
would second that.
Are there other nominations? All right, it's been seconded by Representative Jessup. All right, all those in favor of electing Representative Pahala as clerk, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Senator Lyons, I've
Uh-oh.
spent 4 years mispronouncing Kelly's name, and it's
Uh-oh.
Payella.
It's
Payella,
fine.
no, but-
Really, don't worry about it.
Okay, is that really Payella? Okay, all
Mhm.
right.
It's
I will
finished.
do my best, Representative Payella. All right, we're good.
Thank you.
All right, so today, it's our first meeting, but the agenda was set up by the former chair working with others. And I think that we should just move right into the issues at hand. We're going to 11:30, and we have a lot of things that we want to discuss and bring up going forward. We'll do that at the end. We'll talk about future meetings and agenda planning at the end of the meeting. And we do want to have time for that. So the first item on the agenda is update on raise the age. And I'm going to look to Senator Sears. Do you have anything that you would like to say, or is there, would you like Ledge Council to weigh in on this before we hear from the department,
Well,
from the agency?
I just wanted to have this item on the agenda to raise awareness of the issue. It came up in the governor's veto message of S-107. And since Bryn Hare has left legislative council, she was the chief architect of drafting that legislation. The Senate Judiciary Committee does plan to hold hearings this fall on progress in raising the age and any technical changes that need to be made to the legislation. But I'm really concerned about the governor's message. And I want to make sure that despite the pandemic, we're still on track, because now we have the 18-year-olds and the 19-year-olds will be coming on board in 2022, excuse me. So I asked Representative Pugh if we could put this as an agenda item, simply because of the message that the governor sent in his veto message of 107, which indicated concerns.
Do you, are you suggesting that Eric Fitzpatrick or Katie McClinn go through the raise the age?
I'm suggesting that
looking at,
when the Judiciary Committee takes it up, I would hope that
Okay.
one of them will be able to go through the implementation report. But that's one of the key areas. There was a 2019 implementation report
okay,
done by the Justice Lab at Columbia University in concert with DCF. Karen Vastine, I believe, was assigned to it, and Beth Sosville, former district director in Bennington, and now I don't know her new title. I keep forgetting it. But, and those individuals, I was just hoping to get an update today on where we're at in the implementation.
okay, so we'll move on to the department, it sounds like. We'll move on to the agency, unless Eric, you have something to add, or Katie, you have something to add?
I don't know. Thank you, Senator Lyons. And I think Senator Sears indicated that with Bryn Hare leaving our office, we're still in the middle of transitioning to who's going to take over this topic. It will likely be myself or Michelle Childs. So when Senate Judiciary Committee takes up the topic, one of us will be there to discuss the report, as Senator Sears indicated, but nothing to add this morning. Thank you, though.
All right, well, thank you very much. So, Commissioner, thank you for being here. And Katie, I'm taking that as speaking for Ledge Council generally. Should have, okay, good, thank you. So we have Commissioner Brown and Deputy Commissioner Radke are here. So why don't you present to us where the implementation of the raise the age is at this point.
Sure. Good morning, everyone.
I don't know how you want to do that.
Sure, I'll take the lead on this part of the agenda. So thank you. For the record, Sean Brown, Deputy Commissioner for the Department for Children and Families. We are just finishing out our first year. Today marks actually the last day of the first year of implementation for our experience with Raise the Age. I would say overall, it is serving many of the emerging adults well in the program. Right now, this data we're still trying to finalize the data, but we're currently serving approximately 503 delinquent youth in the state right now. Of those, we believe about 180 are 18 plus. So some of those might have been committed offense while they were 17, but didn't get into the court until they were 18, but whatnot. So that kind of just gives you a sense of the numbers of who we're serving right now in the program. I think what became apparent early on to us last summer when we had a couple experiences with the first few cases, that we did need to enhance the services that we had available for this population of emerging adults, 18-year-olds. And so we did request funds in the budget to develop some new programming to target these age groups. And so legislature agreed and allocated those funds. And so we're currently have a program in Central Vermont that has a little higher level of structure for youth that might need, emerging adults that might need that level through Return House in Barrie. It's actually serving one youthful offender now and doing a fantastic job. Also, we're currently negotiating and finalizing an agreement with the CEOL program in Bennington, as one of the programs that the Department of Corrections is moving away from, and that allowed us the flexibility to start negotiating with that program to maybe switch to serving this age group. And there's an interest, and we're close to an agreement, is my understanding there as well. So that we'll have services in Southern Vermont, Central Vermont, and now we'll be turning our attention to Northwestern Vermont as well, and seeking a provider to provide a similar level of service up in that area as well. I think we're still analyzing what additional services and needs are out there, and you'll probably will not be surprised to see a request next year as well. We're still working through that. I think we're not finished in terms of looking to build out services for this group of emerging adults, particularly as we look at, I believe it's next July that we look at 19-year-olds coming into the system at that time as well. We've also learned that we will be seeking, I think, some technical changes to the law, as Senator Sears indicated. We've had some experience with it now. And I think what we're seeing is just carving out certain offenses as not eligible for youth, for raise, to be treated as a delinquent, is not giving the full picture of the emerging adult that we're trying to serve. I think what we're looking at is enhancing our assessment, our dangerousness assessment, because I believe there are youth who have not been charged with the Big 12, but may not be appropriate based on their level of dangerousness and public safety concerns. And conversely, there may be youth who have been charged with a Big 12 on its face, but might be appropriate to be treated under Raise the Age as a delinquent as well. And I think right now the juvenile justice stakeholder group is kind of working through these issues and talking it through and trying to come to an agreement. And so our hope is that in the fall, when Senator Sears takes up this issue, that we'll be prepared to make some proposals for the committee's consideration at that time. But I would say overall, we expected some bumps being a new program. We've had some bumps, but I would say overall for for the youth, emerging adults in the Raise the Age program now. It's working well, but there are some fixes we'll be seeking.
Can I ask you, when you say bumps, can you just describe a couple of the bumps that you're talking about and what the one of the things I think you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the type of violation. But what are the other bumps that you're seeing?
I would say
And
the other bump we're
what kind
seeing.
of let me finish my question. What programming, if any, additional or community service needs are you seeing as a result of this program?
Well, I would say the first thing that became apparent was that there were some emerging adults coming in that really didn't have a support network in place, so that even if they didn't need a higher level of supervision or services, that they really were struggling for a place to stay in a support system. And so that was the first thing we looked to tackle with our proposal budget request, was to build some housing supports and other services in place for these youth. And I think that was the first thing we identified. And I think, we want to evaluate how those services are working this year as we start referring emerging adults to these programs, and then maybe shift, if we have to shift how we deliver services, we'll be prepared to do that. But also, I think we want to make sure we're serving them well on our end in terms of how DCF's caseworkers are working with them, and making sure we're making the right connections in the communities. And if there are not connections available, that we try to identify how to address those. I think one of the challenges we're seeing, we're used to serving juvenile offenders who are under 18. They were minors. And so under Raise the Age, they're being treated as minors, but in many other areas of the world, they are adults. And so some of those treatment systems are voluntary and not mandatory because they're an adult. And I think those are the things where some of the issues we're kind of working through and understanding the dynamics and how those work in this first year.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the committee? Obviously, go ahead, Senator Sears.
Yeah, I don't want to delay the discussion, but all of these issues were in the implementation report. And I'm going to assume that part of the problem was the pandemic. It took us by surprise, obviously. Nobody could have predicted that would happen right at the implementation point of the Raise the Age. But I do think that it's important for us to learn from these experiences and get it right. I think in the long run, everyone agreed, from the administration to the legislative branch, judicial, and so forth, that this would, in the long run, save us money, better serve youth, and lower crime rates. So, I think we need to keep all that in mind, and I appreciate the commissioner's comments, but I want to make sure that we do not forget our goals here. And the implementation report is really key, because part of what the commissioner is saying is in the implementation report. In other words, the need for more resources, for example.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that reminder, because it is a key initiative, and it is important for saving both human and other capital. Any other questions? Deputy Commissioner Radke, sorry, are you commenting on this as well? No. Okay, good. All right, thanks. Anything else, Commissioner Brown, on this topic?
I would just echo Senator Sears' comments in closing, that I think we all still share in the goals and want this to succeed, and we want to serve these emerging adults well, And so that they're successful later in life, and that they're not burdened by adult criminal charges on their record, and that we intervene early with them, and that we stabilize them, and then we move them forward as quickly as we can. I mean, I think we all share in that goal.
So I guess as we're going along, and one of the things that would be of interest to me is we've been through the pandemic, and we've all heard and seen data assessing increased use of drugs and alcohol. We'll leaving aside mental health issues for the minute, but that the use of those products can also lead to some criminal behavior, or has led to criminal behavior. It would be interesting to look across the state and see where the effect of drug and alcohol use and criminal behavior are implicated. And then what services across the state for those folks for drug and alcohol, substance use disorder, prevention and intervention are available or not available. I think that becomes a large question. It's a question we've been dealing with and thinking about during the pandemic, and whether or not it's going to resolve itself, we don't know.
Yeah, I think with the notice, Senator, I think your points are well taken, and with the numbers of emerging adults that we're serving, it may be possible to do a deeper dive, given it's not a large number of cases, and kind of assess the type of charges and some of the impacts we're seeing, kind of as you described, and maybe could have some better data available for the committee in the future after we complete that work. But I think that would be important work to do on our end.
Thank you. No, I completely agree. And I think Department of Health would probably be a good partner in that work. So unless there are other questions, we'll take a step forward to looking at the foster care delivery system, which has been a concern to us for a long time. And Commissioner Brown, why don't you take the lead on the topic?
Sure. Deputy Commissioner Radke is going to take the lead in presenting, on this topic. But I will say, just yesterday, I participated in a public discussion forum with parents who have been struggling to access services for their kids, particularly crisis services. And this was driven by the late in the session with the legislature looking at the wait times and the number of kids waiting in emergency rooms. And and I would say that I found that forum and listening to the parents really understanding the issue from their perspective and their experiences, and some of their recommendations have been incredibly helpful. And one of the areas, just takeaways, I would say that I want to work on from our department's perspective, while we have some of the other initiatives we're doing, the importance of having a respite care system that's readily available and meets the needs of parents and kids. That's not just a short respite, but might be a day or two's worth of respite. And so I think that was a takeaway from our end, that to better support foster parents and parents in general, that I think it's important that we evaluate our respite system and maybe how we can make improvements to that. But with that being said, I think this has been another area where we've been impacted by the pandemic in our foster care system, and I'll turn it over to Erica to touch on that now.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Erica Radke, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Family Services Division of DCF. And I'm very happy to report on the status of DCF's foster care system. As of June 1st of this year, there were 1,092 children and youths in DCF custody. There are currently 1,299 DCF licensed foster and kin families, with a total of 2,146 placement beds in these foster homes. So, an initial look at those numbers, it may seem to indicate that we have plenty of homes to care for the children in our custody, but our districts are experiencing definitely a different reality. Licensed homes do not always have the capacity or availability to respond to specific needs of the children needing care. For example, in recent years, there's been an increase in the number of teens in foster care, some of whom have engaged in substance use or have mental health challenges, and many that have experienced some form of trauma. So as a consequence, we do have a particular need for foster families that are able to care for these teens and really stand by them as they access supports and services and help nurture them and guide them as they move toward young adulthood. In order to address this situation though, at DCF, we're not just standing still. We definitely are working toward attracting more foster parents in general and attracting foster parents for our teens as well. We continue to implement our diligent recruitment plan, which is designed to increase retention, recruitment, and the capacity of our caregivers. And I'm really happy to report that the data has shown that the plan's implementation is already bearing fruit. Just this last year, FSD has increased the number of kin caregivers we've recruited since 2020 by 11%. We've also begun a new initiative geared more toward our teen population to develop a cadre of specially trained stabilization foster care homes. Caregivers in these foster homes would provide short-term care through a specialized foster care contract at an enhanced daily rate. And an important feature of this plan is that we've partnered with the program to provide intensive support and stabilization wrap services for these families. And that's just as a further effort to create positive outcomes for both the youth and the foster parents. We put out a solicitation to all of our licensed caregivers, and some 23 families expressed an interest in participating in the program. And to date, we've already identified 4 families that have been cleared to move forward in the process. These families are located in various areas of the state, and training in crisis communication and de-escalation techniques is scheduled for August. So we expect this first group of stabilization foster families to be able to accept placements by the end of the summer. And we're really hopeful that this program works to alleviate some of the pressures we're having with placing teens. And this initiative is going to be rolled out in phases. We hope to ultimately have at least 12 stabilization foster homes so that there's one in each district and possibly multiple homes in larger districts. So while there is definitely a need for more foster and kin families for DCF, particularly for our teens, and this situation was exacerbated by COVID, given that we've had a number of families that weren't able to continue participating in our foster care system because of financial stresses or stressors related to homeschooling or lack of childcare or caring for ill loved ones. We do believe that the initiatives we're putting forth are going to work toward working to alleviate some of those issues. So thank you very much for your time. And are there any questions?
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. There are questions, and I have some questions, but I'm going to move to Representative Pugh first, and then Senator Sears, and then whoever's next. I'll be last. I don't mind.
Thank you. And thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Members of the Human Services Committee had, in fact, heard a bit about this before the end of the session. And we had questions then, and I will ask the questions again because this was really just at the starting point when you first talked about it. One has to do with how are they being trained? Who is training them? Is the Child Welfare Partnership training them? Are you connecting with organizations that are already doing specialized foster care such as NFI. And then my favorite question is a higher daily rate. And what in fact does that translate to? And oh, I really hope it is higher than what it costs to board my cat and dog.
Those are a lot of good questions. In terms of training, I am blanking on the name of the organization, but the organization that did crisis communication and de-escalation training for DVH, it's that organization that we've contracted with to do this type of training, not only for our foster families in this specialization program, but also for our some of our specialized social workers that go out on calls with children with higher level needs or in our high-end system of care. So they will actually be coming out twice to do that training.
So it's an organ. So DCF is not in charge. In fact, it's the Department of Health, and this is not training directed at foster care and kids who are at risk of being in state custody, but rather all children who are experiencing challenges. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's actually the same organization. We'd heard good things about the organization, and they contracted with the Department of Health. And now they're just contracting with us, and they will be training, the foster families involved in this program, and also some of our line staff that handle high-end youth as well.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. I think the name of that organization is something we asked for at the end of last session of the session. And so if perhaps someone from your office could provide us with the name by the end of the day, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
In terms of the enhanced rate, we're still working out the contract for the specialized families, but we expect it to be in the 150 per day range at this point, which is a significant increase from the regular daily rate for foster families.
When do you think this will be able to start? It sounds like you've made movement, but this is not, it hasn't really moved since that much since we first became aware of this proposal in April.
Well, once the training is done, we expect to have our first 4 homes up in the end of summer, because we already have an existing contract with Beckett to provide the stabilization and RAP services. So we're just going to be increasing that contract. So that's also in line as well. So it's just a matter of getting the training done.
Thanks.
Can you just clarify the last comment you made about Beckett and how Beckett will be utilized within this, the foster care system?
Sure, Senator Lyons. Beckett will be providing stabilization and support RAP services for the foster families, just to give additional support to the youth that's in the home so that they'll get the services that they need.
So, but Beckett is, but you're not saying that Beckett is doing the training for?
No, not at all. No, it's a program that's been used here in Arizona previously. Oh, I see here, we've contracted with PROACT, and they're the ones via DMH to provide staff to do the training.
Can you give that to us again? Is it PROACT?
Exactly.
All right. All right, thank you.
I see here they trained the staff at the Vermont Psychiatric Care Hospital.
Okay. All right. Senator Sears.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Lyons. I sent around to many folks a copy of a Boston Globe article in early June regarding the foster care situation in Massachusetts, and it ranked Vermont just behind the deficiencies in Mass. And part of the article, I did send a copy to Commissioner Brown. Part of the article cites cases where social workers have been forced to stay with kids in offices in Massachusetts. Social workers forced to care for difficult kids. We know there was an incident where a social worker was injured. I've heard from BSEA about this situation. I don't know if it persists or if it's improved. Part of the problem was transportation. I know there was a bed open for a particular individual in Bennington. He was somewhere in the northwestern part of the state. And Peggy just reminded me that the article is posted on the committee page for Child Protection Committee. It seemed like that article highlighted things that I've heard about in Vermont. Can you comment on where we're headed? Are we still requiring social workers to sit with kids for extended periods? Are we still holding kids in police stations because we can't find a spot for them? What is this current situation?
Sure, Senator, I'll jump in here. I would say we're with the rate of vaccinations and the reopening of Vermont. We're seeing our systems reopen, and we're starting to see that we have the ability to move kids quicker into placements now that the health and safety guidelines are more relaxed and the concerns regarding the virus are minimizing to some degree. So we are seeing an improved system right now. We stopped using motels after that incident you referenced that happened at the beginning of the year. We do have a specialized team of staff now that we call on nights and weekends to triage youth in crisis who might come into crisis or need to be moved from a foster home. We've not had to use that for quite a while now because we are seeing stability in the system. Also, we've been working very closely with Sheriff Marcoux and Sheriff Anderson, and I think we've experienced improvement as well on transportation issues. I've not been aware of any recent concerns in that area. So overall, I would say we're starting to see improvements in our system of care as we're reopening and we're coming out of the state of emergency. We are seeing improvements, and that's a great sign right now. And we just hope some of these other systems we're putting in place will help further alleviate and lead to even better improvement in the coming weeks and months.
That's encouraging. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'd like to echo the commissioner's statements in terms of the special group of people that we have trained to go out in those more difficult situations. It's increased from 16 to 25 people that are willing to volunteer. However, we have not had to call them out in a while. And I do believe that's due to the staff really focusing on the children in certain programs and making sure they're looking for other placements for them so that space is open so that when we do need a bed, there's some availability there. And I'm really proud of the work that they're doing and it's actually showing the system is absolutely improving.
That's encouraging. I'd also heard at that same time from BSEA and individual workers, there was concern about the coordination with the designated agencies in whichever district they were working with, where where they were looking for either help with substance abuse or mental health issues with the children, and the designated agency wasn't able to respond. I know that they've also had their challenges during the pandemic. I don't know if there's been improvements in that area as well. That the foster parent, the DCF caseworker was forced to bring, I'm going to use the term sit on. I know they weren't actually sitting on kids, but sitting with kids, awaiting to get an appointment to hear, to see the designated agency. Has that problem been alleviated?
Well, what I can tell you is that I've been doing a listening tour of all our districts, and that issue does regularly come up in terms of a lack of supports and services from the designated agencies. But I do know that there is a working group for those agencies. They're looking to try to figure out how they can increase, retain, and recruit workers. And I know, and for us, it's been more of a worry that we won't have that support. I have not heard a lot in terms of our workers having to sit with youth for excessive amounts of time to get that kind of training. It's a concern.
I appreciate that. And Madam Chair, perhaps that could be a future agenda item to look at specifically the relationship with ECF workers and local designated agency programs.
And I
Thank
will
you.
add,
I think that's a very good topic to bring up. I did have a question about that, so I'm glad you're talking about it.
and I will add that that topic did come up yesterday in the public forum that was led by the Commissioner of Mental Health and attended by the Commissioner of Dale and myself and the agency secretary, and several parents who had reached out to designated agency crisis services indicated that they've experienced some problems. I don't know how recent they were, but that was identified as an issue, and that's been identified for follow-up as well as an area that needs to be identified. I do know through our other areas of work in the department around supporting folks in the motel system that our designated agencies are really struggling with staffing right now. And I don't know if that's if that is alleviating now, but I do know from that work through the winter that staffing has been a real challenge for the designated agencies, hiring and retaining staff.
Staffing is difficult regardless of the agency or the type of service right now. Social services are really, and medical services have huge need. But so the question, I think, Commissioner, is at one of our next meetings, and we can put this on the agenda, I think, out far enough to get a report back from you on how our social workers in the department are doing relative, and when they have needs, are those needs met within our local social service agencies?
Sure.
Sure.
I would say
this is important to us.
Absolutely, Senator. I think the other thing I would share with the committee, and listening to the staff after that incident that happened earlier this year, one thing that was identified was that there was not a real clear way to share information up through to leadership. And there used to be a labor management committee that for some reason hadn't met in several years in the division. And so we have restarted that committee. FSD leadership, myself, VSEA, and then staff from around the state meet to hear the concerns from the staff, try to find solutions and agreement on a path forward on those. And so that work has begun. We've met once, I think last month, and we plan to meet regularly, just to make sure we're staying in touch with what's happening as close as we can to out in the field.
So I guess in addition to that, that sounds terrific, actually, to have folks who are working out in the field to be in contact to make recommendations. That's excellent. I think what we are also concerned about is what have you put in place to prevent social workers from being isolated with problematic clients, and what connections will they have with, as Senator Sears has pointed out, with local agencies. But beyond that, I know in the past we've talked about having public safety accompany social workers in difficult situations, and where is that at this point? How are these folks being protected? I have a relative who works in the social service area, and I would hate to see her in the same situation as the social worker was I guess it's last year at this point. Anyway, so you can see that I think that's a big concern with all of us on the committee.
And I understand.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Commissioner. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Staff safety is definitely a main priority of mine as well. And we took a lot of steps in terms of discussing when we had cases where there may be an issue with the youth exhibiting violent behaviors in terms of huddles and staffing and discussing the issue. And if there was a situation where a child or youth needed to be, changed placement, we would have a sheriff sit with the youth along with our social worker if they needed to go to a particular area while they're awaiting transport out of state to like another residential placement.
Okay, thank you. Representative Pugh.
Thank you. This sort of expands on the concept of social worker safety and social worker, being able to do their job. And at one point in time, there was a peer support, or there was actually, and there was supervision that was not what I would call administrative. I mean, in addition to administrative supervision, how many cases do you have? Have you checked all the boxes? But there was, in fact, what I would call clinical or case supervision and and support. And so that was both from a supervisor as well as peer support. And I didn't know if that was something that was still happening, or has that gone? Did the pandemic throw a wrench in that? And is that going to start again? And then I'm curious, we have a aspirational goal of the number of families that a caseworker should have on their caseload. And I'm wondering where we are with that aspirational goal and whether we have maintained it. So maybe these are things for, I realize, very specific that may not be answers right now, but to come later or to send us a report.
We're happy to send you some updated caseload information and statistics. I don't have that available right at my fingertips right now, but that's something we can get to you relatively quickly. I would say in terms of clinical support, that was one of our driving reasons we wanted to create a clinical director in DCF to support the Family Services Division, so that staff had a clinician that they could turn to if they had questions or concerns or wanted to talk through a case. That work is rolling out now, and those connections to our staff are being made as our new clinical director is assimilating into the work. And so that's an enhanced support that we're rolling out, and hopefully we'll continue to will grow and be accessed by staff even more than it has been to date. But I know they've been triaging with district staff on some particularly challenging cases, but I think it's good for staff, even when you just have it's not like a really tough case, but sometimes, you just need someone to talk to and talk through different avenues of what might be best for this youth.
And am I making this up? Because I sometimes do. There used to be a structured, i.e. organized through Family Services, I'm calling it peer support. I don't know what it was.
There is a team that meets weekly. That's an interagency team of FSD, DCF staff, mental health staff, I think maternal child and health from the health department, and then also maybe some Dale staff as well that review cases that are sent up and to review and make recommendations of what might be a best treatment plan for those kids in terms of a program or a location or a service that might be needed. So there is a team that meets weekly that does that work. I believe it's weekly. I'd have to confirm that, but I know they meet regularly.
Representative Pugh, are you referring to the HOPE team? That's peer support when there's significant or traumatic issues that occur to support our staff. And they definitely.
I may very well be referring to that, yes.
It's there's definitely a clinician that provides additional support as well. And the HOPE team is definitely robust and it's continuing to be active. I think it's a really great thing to be able to talk to peers when you experience those types of issues to get the support that you need as a social worker, family services worker.
So, and is that helpful, Representative Pugh? Are you set? Okay. Just as we're talking, it might be helpful when you bring the case study information back to us, and also a little bit about the process that I'd like to knit this all together. So the families are getting training for these kids who might be a little more challenging. What's the training they're getting, and then how the recommendations are being made through the social workers and the HOPE team, so that there's some, how is that all coordinated with the families who are taking care of these kids? And then finally, and that includes the issues that we've been talking about in terms of any protections for for social workers and others. But then it's never ending, I think. The issue around respite care that I think Commissioner Brown, you brought up for foster families, it seems that this group of people, and I'm the families, would have significant need for respite care. But respite care is one of those triggers for me, because when we start talking about people who are caring for those with disabilities, not necessarily foster care, that becomes a large discussion. So if you're talking about a day off for a family, how's that going to happen? And then I guess we'd have to move laterally to Dale to figure out how that type of respite support could happen for others. But that's not this committee, but it is an issue. And we'll probably be looking at that at some point in one of our committees. I do have a question, and my question is, as these kids are placed into foster care and they have the wraparound services, hopefully, from the agency, from the department, is there a link with their primary care? Is there a link with primary care for these kids? And then what is the coordination between the primary care folks and the social worker folks? Is it a team? So that you don't have to answer that now, but I think that's an important question.
Well, I will just touch on it briefly, and I think it's probably a topic for more conversation. But in terms of the connection to a child's primary care, where it became in the forefront recently for us, is in working to ensure that youth who are in the eligible age range for a vaccine had access to the primary care, because one of the pieces of our policy regarding vaccinations is that, the primary care for that child, it plays a big role in determining whether it's appropriate for that youth for vaccines, or if there was a health risk. And so we need to ensure that kids are accessing primary care, as we were rolling out the vaccinations and making sure, youth had access to it in our system. And so I can tell you that primary care is an important part of our work, but I'm happy at another time to bring in others who can probably speak to that work in a little more detail than I can, or even Deputy Commissioner Radke can.
Thank you. That would be great. Okay. Committee, other questions for the commissioner or the deputy commissioner?
And then I would say, as I indicated during the scheduling this, I do have to leave at 10 this morning.
Okay, I did not know that.
Apologize.
But so who will be speaking on, will Deputy Commissioner Radke be speaking on behalf of the department around Woodside?
Yeah, I am Judy as well. Judy has been the
Oh,
point.
I'm sorry. Yep,
in the
Judy's here. Okay.
commissioner's office on that project.
Okay, good. But I'm sure we'll see you again in
Oh,
in
yes.
this committee. Yeah, I'm sure. All right. Any other questions, committee, on this in this area? I think we've covered a lot of ground, and the topics that have been brought up, I think, are really important, both from the agency as well as from the committee. So we'll move along together on this one.
Senator Lyons, perhaps it's part
Yes.
of an agenda item later on. I'd love to have a presentation from the group that is doing this training. I'd like
Okay.
to understand who they are and what is the nature of their training and how it is focused on children and youth, as you know, or families dealing with children and youth who are in the custody of the state or at risk of doing so, because those aren't always the same children and youth as
So
other people who have emotional and alcohol issues.
I mean, you raise a very good issue. And so we have this, we'll put this down. And as you're talking about it, I think of the review that that we'll talk later about coming agenda items, but this very much links in with what happens with institutions that care for youth. So I think of Kern Hatton, for example, and we might go further to other institutions that we'll be looking at very soon. Okay, thank you. Please keep track of these agenda items, and if I forget them, the clerk is charged with keeping track. Is our clerk able to do that? She is. I'm sure she is. Okay. All right.
I'm sure she is, and I'm sure the rest of us will fill in.
All of us will. You won't let me forget a thing. I know that. Okay. We're going to move on to the Woodside replacement impact study. We are 4 minutes ahead of schedule, and I'm going to suggest that we take a 4-minute break, and at the crack of 11, we begin again. So is that okay with everyone, just to take a quick break?
And did you mean at the crack of 10?
That's what I meant. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank the committee because I'll have to step out at that point. I won't be back after your break, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We very much appreciate your input.
Thank you.
All right. We're taking a 4-minute break, committee.
Okay, everybody can mute themselves. That'd be great. I'm not going to go off live.
Kim, you get a gold star.
Well, I appreciate the breaks.
Yeah, so I think it's important to take a break. Doesn't need to be long, but it's for our physical and mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is this the final Zoom meeting? The end of an
Oh,
era?
my word. It is. Well, though we can still Zoom if we're not voting, or you can come in by Zoom if you're not
Yep.
going to vote. That actually is a question of clarification I have.
I think,
If the
yeah, I do
committee
too.
is just listening to testimony, if we're listening to testimony,
Yeah.
and can we do it by Zoom without having any votes?
Yeah, it's a good
I
question.
don't know the answer.
I wonder if that's something that either Peggy or Ledge Council could find out the answer for us.
That would be great.
I've actually tried to find out the answer to that, but I have not received clear guidance. I believe there needs to be something in person, but I also believe that you have the option as legislators to Zoom in but cannot vote. But I definitely would not take my word for it. Hopefully leadership will send something out. Maybe Katie or Eric, I don't know if you have more info than I do.
I think
Just
we
gotta
had the
think.
same information passed along
Yeah.
to us. Just that the meetings would be in person, but members would still have the option to Zoom in. But if they did that, they couldn't vote. I don't know if you have anything different, but I think probably waiting to get some guidance from leadership would be your best bet.
We'll work on that. And I think about driving 3 to 6 hours for a 3-hour meeting when there's not an action item. I think we've learned from Zoom that we can be efficient. Anyway, that is only my opinion.
I would like to say that I agree with that opinion. I think if it's an action
good.
item, it's different, but I would totally support what you're putting forward.
Like joint fiscal, you have to vote on a number of issues to approve grants or
Right.
administrative rules. I believe you have to vote. Judicial rules, you vote. But in this committee, we're not necessarily going
LCAR,
to vote
yeah.
on anything.
No. Unless there's a crying need for us to be in person, I just don't. We'll see.
Well, it saves
sure
me
someone-
5 hours.
Well, I know that it saves everyone time. Yeah. All right. And if you're working a second job, it means that you don't have to take time away from the job. You can continue your work. So now that I have squandered away 4 minutes, we will come back to the topic at hand, which is the Woodside replacement impact on the system. And in place of Commissioner Brown, I'm looking for, oh, you're right there. Is it Judith or Judy?
Judy,
Rex?
fine. Yeah.
And what is your title? Please introduce yourself for the record, and then why
Sure.
don't you just you begin? Yep.
Okay. So I'm Judy Rex, and I'm the Director of Policy and Planning for the Department of Children and Families for the Commissioner's Office. I've been pretty involved with the Woodside replacement, working with Beckett and developing the Newberry site. I'm happy to report that we have finalized the design plans. We have resolved the wetlands issue, and we did file for a permit with the Newberry Developmental Review Board this morning. So we are making progress with the building. In terms of the lease agreement, that's actively being negotiated with Beckett through BGS. Mark O'Grady is the kind of the point person, along with the DCF legal counsel, Jennifer Micah. And it's too soon to really report on where things are at with the negotiations. But I think we're hoping that by the end of July, we'll have made some significant progress. And then the third piece is just developing the program, which, as Sean referred to, our DCF clinical director is a point person on that, working with Beckett's clinical director. And also we still have the services of Penny Sampson, who's a consultant from the Council of Juvenile Justice Administrators, and she's a real expert in running secure facilities. And so they're very close to finalizing the program, which is all, not only the program, but the policies, which will all be written out and in one book for you to all look at and review, hopefully by the fall. So I'm happy to take questions if people have questions.
I have questions. I'm going to have most of my questions about the programming and so I will open it up to others first for questions regarding progress on Beckett. It sounds like the permitting process is going forward and the plans for the building are going forward, which includes a building as a secure facility. And then that would also include the grounds around the facility. Okay. And maybe we might want to hear about that as well. So I see Representative Pugh first and then Senator Sears.
Thank you, Senator Lyons. I guess I'm looking for maybe some specifics. One, when this legislature started looking at this, the quote unquote cost was going to be, if not similar, a little less than having a state-run facility. I'm wondering what's happening now in terms of those kinds of things, and what is the time frame by statute? By what time frame does the Development Review Board need to give an answer, a response? Because there's been a lot of, shall we say, mixed views of whether or not this in the community. And I don't know how that will, the Development Review Board should only be looking at certain criteria. I don't know how that will happen. But my question is, by when do they have to make a decision? And what is then the next step to that?
Okay.
So what is our revised, at one point, the pandemic also, I realize, interfered, but this is many months, if not a year later than what we had hoped.
Right. I think initially we had hoped that we'd have the facility open by October 1st of this year, and then it got pushed back to December, and now it's pushed back to late spring or early summer of 2022. The Developmental Review Board, we filed the paperwork today. They have 30 days just to review the paperwork for completeness. And then they'll schedule a public hearing. You are correct, Representative Pugh, that there's certain criteria they can use to evaluate the project. And I think, I'm not quite 100% certain of the timeline, but I think after the 30-day period, there's another 30 days, and there's also an appeal process. And we're pretty sure that some of the neighbors are probably going to appeal whatever decision the board makes. So the answer,
well, it answers my question, and I would put a next summer date as aspirational.
Yes.
Because you won't be able to start construction, and the timeline that you have just laid out does not suggest that any decision will be made before the winter non-construction or fit up kind of thing, or the fencing and those, but anyway. But so this is a long time. We were, at one point in time, the number of justice-involved youth who would need a physically locked facility or a locked secure facility as opposed to a staffed secure facility. I believe the numbers we were told at any one given time was 4 to 6 or something like that. I'm looking at if my memory is correct in terms of that. So Woodside has been closed for a while now. Has been, and that was appropriate. Where are those youth now? And I sure hope they're not at Sununu or whatever it's called.
So I'm going to defer that question to Erica to answer. She would know better than I, but I do believe we have one youth at Sununu.
You're correct, Judy. We do have one youth at Sununu, but given the numbers, they have not been as large as in the past. So there's one there, and all the other youths, if they, we haven't had anybody since then that's needed to have that level of treatment. The rest of the youths are here in Vermont or previously placed in rather residential treatment out of state.
So, if I recall, youth from out of state who were picked up in Vermont on something, that you're not counting those as the youth who were in, that the state has placed in New Hampshire. So the one is, it depends upon how we define youth.
Well, actually, they are no longer at Sununu, so I wasn't counting them for that purpose, really. There's just the one now that is a Vermont youth. But those 3 had been in Sununu. I believe they've all been released within the last month. Is that, Judy, is that your recollection as well?
Yeah, yes.
So I'm going to ask a naive question. Do we need a locked facility? I mean, for a year, for a year, you have not, so either the youth are placed in appropriate settings.
Right, but we do need a secure facility because when we pick up a youth from out of state who has run away and come to Vermont, we're required under federal law to place. So we have to have some secure beds in Vermont.
I would think that it's more just that the size of, the Wells River treatment facility is appropriate. We wouldn't need anything larger than that because those 3 that were from out of state would have gone to Sununu, or, that went to Sununu would have gone there as well as the one that's in Sununu now. So there would have been 4 there.
So the justice-involved youth who traditionally were at Woodside were not, were in fact youth from out of state? So,
No,
I guess I'm trying to understand what's happening. Has our population changed? Has the needs of our justice-involved youth changed? Has practice changed?
Erica, do you want to answer that?
Well, Woodside was definitely before my time, but it was my understanding though, within that last year, there were youth there, but it wasn't a huge number of youth. That was how I understood it.
Right. That's correct.
I'm just wondering where they are now. Are they in foster homes? Are they quote unquote in the community, in their families, in non-secure places?
No, because we've developed some other services to help with the Woodside closure. So we have 2 beds at a Washington County facility that is staff secure. And then we have the Depot program, which is also staff secure. And at times we do have to, with Depot, I think we've had to call the deputy sheriffs to come in and stay with the youth when they're destabilized.
So is this at all related to the work that the legislature and the administration has done in terms of raising the age? No. Okay.
No. because these youths are all under age 18.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Sears.
Well, I'm going to really follow up on Representative Pugh's questions, and she actually asked many of the questions I was going to ask. But I think it's important how you define secure. Whether or not it's a physically secure where somebody's locked in and can't get out, or it's a staff secure facility where someone could leave, open windows, open whatever. So, you know, if it's staff secure is different, and that's the level that I think we're looking at. But I'm confused by this discussion about the governor in his veto message on raise the age used the drug trafficking charges against youth who were, I don't remember his exact words, but indicated there were youth who were, because the consequences would be in juvenile court, were involved in drug trafficking. I wasn't sure whether those youth were being human trafficked. We've heard cases where particularly young women have been human trafficked into Vermont carrying drugs for drug dealers. So I don't know about these 6 kids. And now you're saying 3. So I don't know what the number was that the governor was talking about in his veto message, but he certainly in the veto message indicated they were above 18. And now we're talking about kids who are below 18. So I think that needs to be clarified. Second thing is, according to the neighbors of the Beckett facility, I understood that Mike Smith had promised that they wouldn't use that facility if the neighbors objected. Does anybody know if that's true or not true? That was one of the neighbors who sent, I know Senator Lyons got that same message. And I believe that the letter or the email was to Senator Kitchell, who represents that area.
Right.
I guess those are 3 questions. What is staff secure? What does security mean? What about the neighbors? And then the issue of the kids who were involved in drug trafficking. Were they raised the age kids or were they under 18?
Okay, so the issue of security, the Newberry facility will be a secure, locked facility that the youth will not be able to leave on their own. They won't be able to open windows, or doors are locked, and then it'll be there's a fence around the building, similar to Woodside. So I think does that answer your question, Senator Sears?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but what is staff secure? Depot is staff secure, am I correct?
Right, my understanding, and Erica jump in, is that staff secure doors that are not locked. It may be a delayed lock on the door, but the kid can still get out.
Yes, you're right. Depot is staff secure, whereas the facility in Wells River will be, what's the term? Fully secure?
I guess physically secure, yeah.
Physically secure.
But so in my understanding of staff secure is also that it's typically one-on-one staffing with the youth.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And then regarding the neighbors, I think the neighbors are still opposed to I know they're still opposed to the project. I don't know what you're talking about. This Secretary Smith made any kind of concession to them that I'm not aware of.
Well, according to the email, he did, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. And
I'm not aware of that either.
Yeah.
That actually might be something for the agency to clarify, because when we get emails from constituents, whether our own district or others, and they indicate that a secretary or a commissioner or deputy commissioner, a director of planning has said something as a promise, we get concerned about that. So it would be helpful for us to hear directly as to whether or not the secretary made that, I guess it's a promise, or made that statement that the facility would not open if the neighbors objected. Because I did
I
get
can
the,
follow. Right,
Yeah,
I'll follow up with
please.
Secretary Smith and Sean Brown about that. and get back to you.
Thank you.
If I can find that email, I'd be happy to forward it to you, Judy.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
It's an old, it's, you know, anything over a week is old to me and hard to find.
Anything over a day is old. This gets old.
And then,
Okay,
I think
that-
that would be helpful.
Regarding the number of kids who were in the governor's veto message and what the age was of those kids and what they did, how many were there, what was their age, and what was the,
The last 3 youths that I recall that were trafficking drugs and had weapons, they were between 16 and 17 years old. They definitely were not 18 or over. And they were detained, and 2 were sent to Sununu, I think through the ICPC process, but I believe the other one had a pending charge. So I believe he was sent straight back to Massachusetts, but in any event, the cases ended up being dismissed. With language, I guess the police officer didn't have a translator to advise the use of their rights.
I mean,
But none of these would have been raised the age youths.
I would just, you know, the reason I guess it's important to me is I felt like when I saw that in the veto message, I was disappointed. It quite frankly, you know, you could have problems with raise the age, but I'm not sure that that issue was a problem with raise the age. And I think you've clarified that in this. I do
Senator
appreciate
Sears,
that.
I'm happy to follow up with the Secretary's office in the 5th floor to find out, get more information on what he was referring to. I do believe there have been some 18-year-olds who have been involved in incidences with guns and drugs in Vermont.
Well, at the time that we look at if I wanted to scare people, that's what I would do. And so I think we need to get this clarified, and we need to, at least at the time that this fall, when the Judiciary Committee looks at this and the issue of dangerousness comes up, I think we need to better understand those issues. And I think that I already said enough, but I think that that's where the issue of dangerousness comes in, and it's indicative of something that I did not expect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
Other
reminds me of
questions?
an attempt, it reminds me of an attempt to scare people. You pass this law, what I see going on in other states, you pass this law, and now you're allowing drug traffickers to send kids here with firearms and et cetera. And, you know, that's what they're doing in New York over their bail reform bill. And it's clear politics. I think it detracts from us having honest conversations about where problems might lie within the legislation.
This sounds
You
like
don't need to
something.
comment on that, Judy. I think it's important that I make that statement. Thank you.
Senator, you've just raised this huge issue. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? I'm gonna hold my questions and comments. I think I'd like to hear from the folks who we have on the agenda first. But I'm hoping that Deputy Commissioner Radke and Director Rex will stay on so that we can have a broader discussion. Okay, good.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on to Evan Meenan. Evan, why don't you introduce yourself for the record and offer comments on your perspective. I know one of the comments that's been made is that we have folks from the sheriff's department staying with youth who may have questionable behavior. So that's actually a question I have, and what's the cost for that? But before we get to that, why don't you please, the number of times it happens, but why don't you please just provide some information on this in this area?
Absolutely.
Good
For the
stuff.
record,
Yeah.
my name is Evan Meenan, and as mentioned earlier, I work in the Executive Director's Office of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. I think I'm meeting some of the legislators for the first time this morning, so I'd like to spend just 20 seconds giving a very, very brief background. I joined the department at the beginning of May. I think it was the first Monday in May. And before that, I was the Associate General Counsel for the Natural Resources Board. And before that, I was also in private practice. I worked for the Agency of Natural Resources, and I worked for both Bill Sorrell and TJ Donovan in the criminal division of the Attorney General's office, where my caseload focused primarily on drug task force cases, allegations that law enforcement officers engaged in criminal conduct, homicides, and internet crimes against children task force cases. And that latter group was most of the work that I did. In advance of today's committee meeting, I reached out to all of the state's attorneys, all 14 of them. Out of the ones that had sufficient time to respond to my inquiry, there seemed to be consensus that there is a need in the state of Vermont for a secure placement option for juveniles. And so I was very pleased to hear that DCF is making some progress on the development of that Newberry site. There also appeared to be consensus amongst the state's attorneys that any secure placement option should be capable of providing services on site to the juveniles housed there. In other words, it would be unfortunate if the site was being used just for individuals to sit there without obtaining any of the services needed to address any of the issues that led to their problematic and concerning behavior. There is the feeling that without a secure placement option in the state, we are going to risk creating situations that are unsafe both for juveniles and state workers. I think twice already this morning, folks referenced the incident that occurred this past February at a Hampton Inn, which was very unfortunate. And so again, I was very pleased to hear that DCF is not using hotel rooms, but I think there is the question of, what is going to be used in the future as a surrogate for those. There is some concern, and there's been some questions already this morning about how to handle young adults who are covered by the Raise the Age. And the department and the state's attorneys I spoke with share those concerns because there is a concern that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds being treated as youthful offenders or delinquent children is going to increase the need for a secure placement option. Right now, I think there is some access to Sununu and to Beckett Family Services in New Hampshire. Fortunately, apparently, according to some testimony earlier this morning, we haven't had to access those facilities too frequently. I think we heard that there's only one individual being housed at Sununu presently. But when those services are needed, it is difficult sometimes to access them. For example, Sununu, is my understanding, only accepts juveniles aged 13 to 17. And Beckett also has some limitations in their residential programs that are specific to a juvenile's age or gender. And so when we are talking about some of these 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, I think the state does need to ask when a secure placement is necessary, where is it appropriate to house them? There are also some administrative hurdles to accessing facilities outside the state of Vermont, such as compliance with the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children. And that risk, can create delays in accessing them. That is to the detriment of both the youth and the state workers who are with them. Earlier, I think Deputy Commissioner Radke mentioned actually a recent situation that occurred in the state involving a couple of juveniles from Massachusetts. And that was one of the examples that was brought to my attention by the state's attorneys. There were 3 juveniles who were stopped who from Massachusetts, who came to Vermont, and they had both drugs and guns. Now, those individuals were, I believe, around 17 years old. So Senator Sears, not the type of individuals that would have been referenced in the governor's veto message. But they did come here to the state of Vermont with both drugs and guns. Now, 2 out of the 3, it turns out, were already on juvenile probation, and the 3rd already had a pending charge against them. So unfortunately, because of the delays in trying to find suitable placements for them, they had to wait around quite a while in a local Vermont police department until the 2 who were on probation could be sent back to Massachusetts. And the 3rd, I think, is my understanding, was actually sent to Sununu. But the process of navigating that did take hours, where these individuals were housed at a local police department. And I will mention that there was a lot of credit for resolving this situation was given to Patricia Casanova at DCF, who was of great assistance to the state's attorney. In light of the Raise the Age law and the additional individuals that will be treated as juveniles, I also received some feedback that indicated that when this new facility at Newberry or any other facilities are going to be used as a secure placement option, some consideration needs to be given to which individuals are going to be housed and grouped together because of physical, mental, and other developmental disparities that might exist. For example, a 13-year-old versus a 20-year-old, how is the facility going to be structured to protect both of their safety and the safety of the state workers who are going to be there? And the department feels pretty strongly that those issues should be addressed, that there should be a secure placement facility because it wants to see the Raise the Age law implemented successfully, as I think everyone this morning has also indicated. Now, I also want to reiterate that, the department is exploring these, potential solutions to some of these issues related to Raise the Age, the issues identified in the governor's veto message. And we are going to be looking at how the delinquency and youthful offender processes could be working more smoothly. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position today to express any viewpoints on behalf of the state's attorneys, because we ourselves are having lots of the same conversations that you legislators and the other folks on this group are having. But I can tell you that when we do develop that proposal, we hope to reach back out as early as possible to have constructive conversations, because it does seem as though everybody is hoping Raise the Age will be successful. Senator Lyons, in response to your question, I did not have an opportunity to reach out to all of the sheriff's departments in between receiving the invitation to testify this morning and appearing before you. So unfortunately, I don't have any statistics regarding the frequency with which sheriffs have to sit with these youths, or how much money that is costing the sheriff's departments. But I would be happy to follow up on that information and get back to you as soon as possible.
And as you're doing that, it would be very helpful to understand what training, if any, these folks are going through to care for these youth.
I would be happy.
It may be a different. Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I'd be happy to follow up on that point as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Meenan?
I would just say that a part of the charge to the Justice Oversight Committee, as opposed to this committee, is the sheriff's transports and the sheriff's
right.
issues. We're supposed to provide a report back as Senator Lyons knows, who's a member also of that committee. So I think we would be covering part of that there, but I was interested to hear that sometimes on the Depot Street or CO programs, they've been required to hire a sheriff to watch kids, which is similar to what might have to happen at a DCF office, I guess. So maybe you could get information on that as well.
I'd be happy to follow up on that.
As much as I
We
play
don't want
golf
to
with
overlap
people
too
that,
much.
as
but-
much as I play golf with people that work at CL, I don't get the inside information on operations anymore.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you for the information. It is helpful. And we'll look forward to further information from your organization. And as you complete your work with all the state's attorneys, that would be helpful. And what, if any, general policy you'll be putting together for this group of youth, juveniles. All right, so Marshall Paul is here. No, thank you. Zoom is difficult. I talk over people and apologize for that way up front, but it's unavoidable from time to time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Marshall Paul. I'm the Chief Juvenile Defender and Deputy Defender General. I'll keep my testimony fairly brief because honestly, we agree with a lot of the testimony that's been provided so far. We agree that there is a need for a small number of secure beds in the state that can serve the delinquent and primarily the delinquent population, though I think there's also a need for placements, not necessarily, hardware secure placements, but because I think, we often talk about, and this is a little digression, but it's certainly something that's come up today, is we often talk about placements in terms of their level of security. And we're talking really specifically about, really sort of infrastructure pieces. Are there locks on the doors? Are there bars on the windows? Are there, fences around the perimeter? And honestly, that's only part of the equation. A whole nother piece of it is the extent of services provided, the type of services provided, and the type of staffing that's provided, and that's really a whole different piece of the puzzle, and they fit together. And particularly when you're talking about kids who are in that late adolescent range, we're often talking about kids who don't need the same type of physical security, but absolutely may need the staffing and really intensive service provision. And I think that comes up most often with, what's been sort of identified as one of the hardest groups for our state to deal with, which is kids really, we're describing them different ways. We're talking about it in terms of kids who come up from Massachusetts or, but what we're really talking about is we're talking about kids who lack systems of support here in Vermont. They don't have family here in Vermont. They don't have friends here in Vermont. They don't have service providers here in Vermont. They don't have people to support them. And that's what makes them particularly hard to serve, because our juvenile justice system is really dependent on, and with good reason, I'm not suggesting that this is something that's negative at all. It's very dependent on using systems of support that already exist for kids. And the reason why that's such a good thing is because that's how justice systems are the most successful. A justice system that just simply tries to treat people in a facility and then turn them loose on the street doesn't work. Justice systems that work in facilities, in placements, and also outside of placements, and work with families, with communities to provide support and stabilization around kids. That's what really reduces kids' risk level, reduces youth crime overall, and also makes it a lot easier to work with the kids when they are engaged in the system. When it's not just DCF trying to sort of be everything for one kid, and instead DCF is just a service provider, and they're really using the rest of the supports that kid has naturally. That's when the system is most successful. And so that sort of brings us to those kids who are coming up from out of state. And the one thing that I really wanted to clarify, because I think it's been, sort of sloppily characterized, is sort of the timeline of this issue of kids coming from out of state with drugs, with guns, to Vermont. And I think one of the most important things to point out is that that's not a new problem. That really, we've had a lot of discussions about this in various stakeholder groups and work groups. And I don't think anybody has said that it's a new problem or that it's even a problem that has increased with Raise the Age. This is a problem we've been seeing for years and years and years. In my experience, we were seeing this problem even before the heroin epidemic, when it was just I shouldn't say just but when it was primarily our opioid problem was pills, oxys. We were seeing teenagers from Hartford, Connecticut, and from New York coming up here bringing pills in. So this is not at all a new problem. And I also think that these kids who are caught bringing drugs in, they get treated typically in a way that's not, in my mind, it's inappropriate. And the reason is they get clearly perceived as being different than they are. These kids, we talk about them as out-of-state kids. We talk about them as Massachusetts kids. We talk about when Vermont kids get arrested. We talk about what do they need as far as services, what do they need as far as support, what do they need as far as stabilization. When we have kids from Massachusetts who get arrested, often the conversation revolves around topics of dangerousness, security, and how do we get them back to Massachusetts as fast as we can. And I think that a lot of that is actually driven by the fact that a lot of these kids, first of all, in Vermont, we've always had a really good system of dealing with working within our communities and using our communities to provide support. Our systems have failed when we don't have those communities to rely on. And the perception that these kids who come up here with drugs are more dangerous than Vermont kids is not accurate. We haven't seen that. That they are more difficult to provide treatment or care to is not accurate. We haven't seen that. What it is actually, I think in a lot of cases, is a lot of these kids who are coming from out of state are non-white kids. We know that non-white kids are perceived to be older than they really are. And they're perceived to be more dangerous than they really are. To what extent that reflects in the way that these kids get treated, I'm not sure. It's really hard to quantify. But I do think we can't have that conversation without acknowledging that we're not talking about white Vermont kids. We're talking about kids who are primarily non-white coming from out of state and really getting sort of a different view of our juvenile justice system than Vermont kids would get. So to my mind, those are Vermont kids. They get arrested in Vermont for breaking Vermont laws. If they are going to be, if we're going to hold them accountable in the state of Vermont, we need to treat them just the way we would any kid from Vermont who got picked up for the same type of offense. And we see that. We see kids from Vermont getting picked up with guns, getting picked up with drugs. It's not as if this is a problem that only relates to these, kids from out of state. So I just wanted to make sure we address that. Other than that, on the issue of Woodside and Woodside replacement, I don't have much to add to the conversation that's already taken place. Like I said, we support the direction that things are heading. We've been very supportive from the beginning of having a very small program with a very small number of hardware secure beds. And it looks like, that's the direction that things are heading. Of course, there's delays and it's not happening as quickly as everyone would like. That I think is the nature of all projects of this size. They all seem to get delayed one way or another. And this is no exception. So we're, concerned about the delays, but cautiously optimistic and supportive of the direction things are going.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I will say the two questions that I had earlier that I have put off because I think we're going to have to hear about this in detail going forward was the programming that will be in place and the service coordination that will be in place. And then the staffing, and the staffing question does extend to the folks who we have had work for DCF, and then what's going to happen as Beckett gets put in place. So those are two very critical questions, I think. Are there any questions for Marshall Paul from?
I just want to thank Marshall for
committee.
his comments regarding the out-of-state youth. And I do appreciate putting it in the proper context, and it's unfortunate it ended up in the veto message.
Thank you.
I also
Yes,
wanted to, I did send Judy Rex and you, Senator Lyons, and Representative Pugh a copy of the statement. It was actually from Commissioner Brown regarding the neighbors, and it was evidently at a meeting of the House Human Services Committee. And there is a video, an audio clip that the person included, and I forwarded that to you, Judy. He did transcribe the audio portion of it in his email to me.
Did you send that also? You sent it to Judy Rex. Did you send it to Deputy Commissioner Radke, or?
No, I did
Would
not.
you?
I figured, hopefully, if you don't get it, Judy, let me know.
I got the email and I will share it with Sean
Okay.
and with Eric, and we will respond to the committee.
Okay, well, you may want to respond to that.
Maybe
believe
you
we
gotta
did.
talk with the neighbors.
Well, we have been talking with the neighbors, and I believe Sean did send a response to that inquiry.
Okay. Well, I had the wrong person, so I mistakenly blamed Commissioner Secretary Smith, and it was really Commissioner Brown. And it was really House Human Services' fault.
All right, gosh, so that we escaped that one. Thank you. Thank you for that, Senator. That's very helpful. So we'll move on to Brian Gerson, Chief Superior Judge is here.
Good morning again, everyone.
Brian Gerson, Judge Gerson, you are. Good morning.
Good morning again. For the record, Brian Grierson, Chief Superior Judge. I think I would be probably echoing a lot of the comments that have already been made this morning. I would start with the first item on the agenda, at least from the judiciary's perspective, raising the age to 18. Obviously, it started, as Senator Sears noted, during the pandemic, and whether it's for assessing raise the age or essentially any other involvement with the court during this pandemic year, 2020 is not a good year to measure the success or lack of success in any new programs, say nothing of our standing programs. But from the judiciary's perspective, raising the age to 18 has not had an adverse impact in terms of the number of cases coming in and how they've been handled. Obviously, leading up to that, there were concerns about the volume and how the courts were going to handle it. My impression is, and at this point it is for the most part anecdotal, there has not been the significant adverse impact that some folks had anticipated. So I think that's certainly a good point that the committee should be aware of. But what came out at the recent Justice Oversight Committee hearing, and I just want to make sure that my position then was clarified. What we have seen is a significant increase in youthful offender filings, much more dramatic than we had anticipated. And so that is a docket that has greatly expanded. Senator Sears asked me at that meeting if we were able to determine, the number I gave him represented the filings of youthful offender requests. And Senator Sears asked if we were able to track how many of those requests were actually granted for youthful offender status. And we cannot do that without doing an individual, if you will, a manual following each one of those cases. So I certainly do not have that information for this committee today or in response to Senator Sears, but I will try to get that information for future hearings because I think it would be a significant change in the number, but it's still an increase that has impacted the courts. With respect to Woodside, and there have been earlier testimony today, there have been perhaps a small number of cases that have presented problems not only to DCF, to the prosecutors, obviously the impact on the sheriffs. We are certainly looking forward, when I say we, the judiciary, are looking forward to the options available through the Beckett facility. And the fact that it's a secured facility as, if you will, a replacement for Woodside. But I think we have to keep in mind the different ages of the populations that are being served here. And my understanding is that the Beckett facility will not be able to hold 18, 19, and or 20-year-olds. And as we move ahead with raising the age to 19, and if this number of youthful offender requests continues, we're talking about a population where, if I understand the information from the department, the resources or the options available for 18, 19-year-olds, particularly that group, and albeit it's a small number, I will say, of serious offenders, that there will not be, as I understand it, a facility within the state to hold those individuals. And I think that's something that the committee, I'm sure, has in mind, but it's a concern for the judges when they're dealing with those individual cases where the options are narrowed. I think DCF has done a commendable job in making arrangements for out-of-state placements where necessary, for alternative programs within the state with staff secure facilities. But those are some of the concerns that the judges, in the time frame that I was able to reach out to them in anticipation of this hearing, those are some of the concerns that they have expressed to me and wanted to be passed on to this committee. So we're looking, as I said, we're looking forward to the availability of Beckett. I know originally we were hoping that it would be late this year or early next year, and it now sounds like it will be longer. So we will continue to grapple with where, as I said, even with a few cases that come into play, where can they be placed in the meantime? And the ICPC process, as other witnesses have indicated, is available, but it is not, it is a cumbersome process, and it's a time-consuming process. But we will continue to work with DCF as well as the other stakeholders involved in the juvenile justice program to address some of these issues that have been raised today. Thank you.
Nothing is ever simple.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Well, thank you for raising the issues, and I think that it jives with, corresponds with what Evan Meehan indicated to us earlier and others. Questions for Judge Grierson? Did you have more, Judge? I didn't want to
No,
stop you.
as I said, I've been listening all morning, and I don't want to reiterate what other witnesses have said, but I think we're certainly making progress, raising the age, and with the Beckett facility, but we still have some other areas that need to be addressed.
Thank you. Questions for Judge Grierson? And also understand that Justice Oversight will be looking at some of these issues as well, so it will have to stay connected with what that committee is doing. But it does, as we raise the age, it does raise issues and how we can support this new category of juveniles. No question. Representative Pugh, did you have a, I thought so.
It's probably, Senator Lyons, it's probably more of a question for you in hopes that Judge Grierson can stay, because my questions to him as it relates to the judiciary have more to do with the non-justice involved youth. But in fact, what I believe are the majority of children and youth who are in the custody of the state and who are in foster care. And I look to the deputy commissioner to say, no, Ann, you're totally wrong. But it's off of Woodside, but I want to, the pandemic and court has impacted that. Otherwise, it'll be an agenda item for the future.
No, it is an agenda item because it is a question that I have as well. So perhaps Deputy Commissioner Radke, can you help us understand what the numbers are for those who are in the custody of the state with behavioral versus judicial issues? And you're muted.
That is a number I actually don't have at my fingertips, and given the challenges with our computer system, I'm not even sure if I can really tease that out, but I'll absolutely try and then provide you with that information.
Right. I mean, and Deputy Commissioner, maybe just the number of chins, I mean, you have.
Absolutely, I can do that.
You have people, I guess, people enter through many doors and they probably look a lot alike. But some of the doors through which families and children and youth enter is because of children in need of supervision, child abuse and neglect. And not to say that the children and youth don't have issues that in response to this, that perhaps show themselves in behavioral and other challenging behaviors. They have not up to this point done a crime or what would be considered a crime. And so there's similarities, and I'm respectful and thankful of Marshall Paul for sort of reminding us to not other people. But I do want us to remember the other population of children and youth that Family Services deals with.
I can get you the CHINS numbers for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think
Madam Chair.
That's actually, let me just quickly state that actually what Representative Pugh has brought up was a future agenda item that I wanted to bring up with the committee a little bit later. So just that's all. Senator Sears, go ahead.
Yeah, when Representative Pugh and I were putting together the agenda at the last moment, I realized I had left Steve Howard off from the VSEA, and I appreciate that he's here. I don't know if he has brief comments, but that's why he's here, and that was my mistake.
Well, we can't overlook Steve Howard. Thank you for being here. And
I thought the dog barking was his because I was looking at mine and mine was being nice.
Worried she was going to start barking, but thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity. For the record, I'm Steve Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the VSEA, and I'm really here to speak for the frontline family service workers who are dealing, in real time with youth and in the system that we have now. And to prepare for this testimony, I met with our leaders in DCF Family Services, and they sent out my cell phone number and email address to our members across the state. And I will tell you that in the last 24 hours, my phone has blown up with comments from family service workers all throughout the state with a message that they would like me to share with you. I will cut right to the chase and then try to explain why I'm saying it. Our members believe strongly that there is a need for a state-run, state-operated, secure facility and that there's a need for that now. That there is really a crisis at hand, that we cannot wait until next summer to open up a facility in state. A secure facility is needed now, clearly from the message from the frontline workers. And I just want to say that I think my testimony is going to be in stark contrast to what you heard from Commissioner Brown and from the Deputy Commissioner. What I was told by our members is the system that has existed for both Chin's cases and for justice-involved youth since the closure of Woodside was put together with masking tape and bubble gum. And when I asked them yesterday for an update on where we stood and whether progress has been made, they described the system as crumbling. So it's very different from what you heard from the management. What they said is, while we're grateful that the department did answer our demand, that our members not be put in unsafe working conditions by watching youth in hotel rooms. We're really grateful that they did honor that demand. What they reported to me, what our family service workers reported to me, is that they are watching kids in DCF offices on a regular basis. They're at police stations constantly. And that kids are being released to their families and sent back before they receive the services that they need or the services they would have received at Woodside, which were nationally recognized by the Department of Justice, without any services because there's no place to put these kids. They also reported that law enforcement is contacting them and saying, do you have any place for this kid? If I charge this kid, is there any place for this youth to go? And when the social worker or the family service worker says no, the youth is not being charged. So that may explain some of the numbers and what's going on in the world out there. I did hear from a fair number of family service workers who believe that there are 10 to 15 kids who should be in a secure facility now. And what we heard from them was the process, and I think Judge Grierson made reference to this, the process of getting those children placed in Sununu is very cumbersome, it's very time consuming, and it's not working. And so that was a big point that they wanted me to make. They wanted to complement great programs and good community partners like 204 and 207 Depot Street in Bennington, but those beds are filled, and they're often filled with kids who would otherwise have been at Woodside. And that is causing a ripple effect with kids who are not justice involved, but who do need a bed. And that's also true with other facilities like Mountainside. Now, some of the points they wanted to make is that there are some concerns or some impacts still from the pandemic, where residential placements across the country are not taking youth, and those youth are backing up in our system and filling beds that would be otherwise available for Vermont youth. And there's a staffing problem throughout the human services infrastructure, I guess is the way to describe it. I think the other point that they wanted to make is that, look, if the state doesn't want to have a state secure facility, that's fine. But there are no wraparound services. There are no community supports for these kids now. There aren't enough foster families. And there certainly aren't foster families or any placements for kids who would be described as high risk. They described to me a very difficult situation in finding even places for low end, sort of like the low end kids who don't have behavioral problems that would be either violent or threatening. And they wanted me to convey that it's even harder to find a place. If you can't find someone who hasn't exhibited violent or damaging behaviors, it's even more difficult to find. It's even more difficult to find one for those who have. So they wanted me to make sure that was really a point that was also made. They did have a comment on raise the age, and they didn't want really to just get into the merits of whether raise the age is good public policy or not. But what they did want to say is that it presents a particular problem for DCF. And this is particularly true in Chittenden County. They were expressing a concern in Chittenden County. And it has to do with whether the courts or whether the prosecutor feel DOC is an acceptable to put somebody under the rate who would qualify under raise the age. That what they're finding is that DOC is not being found as an acceptable place to put those kids, and that DCF is the fallback. And what the message that is clear from the frontline family service workers is they are not prepared, not trained, and not able to handle these youth who have exhibited, in many cases, very violent behaviors. They are asking, they don't know what the answer is, but they know that DCF in its current state is not equipped to safely monitor this population, and that something other than DCF needs to be found, or DCF additional resources and training need to be brought up to bear. But right now, they're being asked to monitor youth who have been charged with violent crimes, and they do not feel capable or trained or prepared to do that. I think one point that BSEA would like to ask this committee to look at in future hearings, you know that we were against spending $3 million to renovate a facility that would be leased from a private company, a private out-of-state company in the Beckett facility. We still remain opposed to it. We know that at the Windsor Correctional Facility, there is a 10-bed dorm that the state owns right now. That is, we spent $150,000 a year to mothball. It is in a beautiful setting, a therapeutic setting, and it would seem to make sense for the crisis that exists now with the lack of secure beds, that facility be opened up immediately, because it's a crisis from the perspective of the frontline workers. And that we look at whether it makes sense to put the $3 million into that state-owned building where we don't have to pay rent in the future. And it is a beautiful setting. It is surrounded by 100 acres of land that is managed by the state of Vermont. And there are no neighbors. There are not a lot of neighbors around that facility. So perhaps we could rethink this philosophy, this plan, and try to find something that makes more sense for the taxpayers and also more sense for the youth, and especially for the frontline workers in DCF who are trying to sound the alarm that the system is crumbling. And we need urgent action to address these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for reaching out to the frontline workers to give us that perspective. It does open up a number of questions and reinforces some others. So I don't think that we have the capacity to categorically open the Windsor facility, but it's certainly a suggestion to be considered that I would think the agency should perhaps consider. When I grew up in a town that had a training school for boys, and it was in a lovely setting, and the kids came from all over the state of New York to be treated and cared for, and many of my friends' parents worked at that facility, and it was pretty comprehensive. It's been shut down since, but well, you never know what happened, what's it all comes back around sooner or later. Okay. Thank you for that. And Senator Sears, thank you for reminding us that Steve Howard was here, and we did have his testimony.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I'm sorry.
Questions, comments?
I would only comment that what regarding the DCF staff, that was in the implementation report in 2019, the need for resources and the need for improved training and so
forth. Maybe we should just look at that report. Maybe we could have Peggy post that on our webpage. That would be helpful.
Can somebody send it to me? Can somebody send it to me? I seem to have misplaced it, or
Senator Sears, if you're muted, Senator. You're still muted.
Oop,
Okay.
I was muted.
Yes.
I will try to send that to you right now, Peggy. Thank you.
All right.
And Senator Lyons,
Yes.
I just wanted you and Representative Pugh to know, I sent some data that we had relating to Chin's filing as well as other juvenile filings. It is a snapshot because the data only covers the first half of this fiscal year, but as soon as the data is available, we'll get that to this committee as well as Justice Oversight, but at least you have should have in your email now some numbers and projections.
Did you copy Peggy on that?
No, but I will.
Okay. Please do. And
All right.
then we'll put it up on the webpage so everyone has access to it.
All right.
Thank
I will.
you. That's
You're
very
welcome.
helpful. Okay. So committee, it is a little past the time we were going to reserve for committee discussion, but we can do that. We've covered a lot of ground and we've opened up a lot of issues that we want to be looking at going forward. I will say that the whole area of child abuse data, CHINs, and what's happened during the pandemic, how it's being handled now, that whole area I think is important to us. Do we have a report on that? No, we don't.
No.
But I'm looking at Deputy Commissioner Radke, and just as a heads up, we will probably be asking, as Representative Pugh has, for some data on CHINs, and then what we've all heard that the reporting on child abuse has decreased during the pandemic, yet we understand that there may be an increase in incidences of abuse. And I'm just wondering if there's a group within the agency or that works with you on child abuse. I'm thinking of Linda Johnson's group that might have a handle on what's going on with child abuse.
I do, yeah, Linda Johnson's group would have a good handle, and I can tell you in terms of our numbers, calls to our CIES, the emergency services line, while there was a dip in calls and accepted cases during the pandemic, the numbers have started to increase, but only to typical levels. We haven't seen an actual spike.
Okay. Well,
And I
that's
can
helpful.
provide you those numbers
But
specifically.
we will, yeah. Okay. I think what we'll do is we'll circle back and we'll have some time during one of our committee meetings to talk about child abuse generally and where the prevention services are and what's happening overall. The other area is I won't bring up my other areas. I'd like to open it up for discussion. We've heard something about foster care training, the need for training and at different levels, whether it's in public safety or for the raise the age folks, what's going on there. Help me, committee members, with what you have heard today that you'd like to follow up on in our future meetings.
Senator Lyons, as you talk about or identify training and foster care training, I think it would be perhaps illustrative or helpful if this committee, however briefly, heard from the Child Welfare Partnership, heard from this group called ProAct Inc., which I looked at online, which identifies itself as focusing on training around assaultive behavior. And I have received an inquiry, and it might be helpful to us in terms of what we hear from perhaps like what we heard actually both from the Deputy Commissioner and from the staff through Steve Howard was the difficulty in terms of finding foster care placements at the time when they're needed. And I was apprised of a group called Raise a Child. No idea what that might be something that it's an organization nationally that focuses on, I guess, foster care. So I would just be more specific when we talk about training.
Representative Pugh, it would be extremely helpful, as well as for others, to send a short email to me and to Peggy, and then we can line some of these folks up as we go forward.
Okay.
Yes. Senator Sears.
Yeah, I would like to have us look at Kern Hatton and the current situation that may need legislation, because once, as I understand it, DCF or Kern Hatton, it depends on who you ask, but they're no longer a residential treatment license. And so DCF has no real involvement, but they have kids there and they have a history of failing to report child abuse and child sexual abuse. And I'm really concerned now, the Department of Education, and I don't know, and there may be other situations like this around the state, but I do think we need to make sure kids are protected when mandatory reporters aren't making reports, or at least the institution has a history of not making reports.
Well, you raise an issue that I'm very concerned about, and that is what was the initial, we haven't really dived into the DCF report to understand the conditions around Kern Hatton and how the agreement was made. So we will want to look at that. And then we'll also, I think, because we're looking at child protection, we can bring AOE in as well, and find out a little bit about the decision making there. And
well,
then go ahead, Rep.
No, I thank you. I'm just going to say thank you for bringing that up, because I am totally perplexed as to how the part of state government whose role it is to protect children and does not license a particular facility, how another arm of state government can go, oh, that's all right, we're just going to have kids go to school there and be there overnight. I don't get it.
Well, so the question is, and this will be where our Ledge Council will help us understand a distinction between residential care facilities and with support services and what services are available, and residential care facility schools without support services. So it'll be interesting, and a little bit of the history. I don't think we were interested, at least we have in our committees in the Senate gone through some of the abuse that's taken place and heard reports. We want to understand where this institution is today. And then I agree with you, Representative Pugh. It's confounding. What's going on when you're sending very young children to a residential facility, and how is the state providing any oversight whatsoever, if any whatsoever? Or is it simply an outside credentialing agency, professional agency? So there are a lot of questions here.
My concern is also that there may be other agencies similar to Kern Hatton that are not covered, may have a license from the Department of Education, but nothing in terms of structure. We know that Kern Hatton had a history of not filing child abuse reports. And so
Senator Lyons, on a whole different topic, and Deputy Commissioner Radke, please correct me if I'm wrong on the timing but I believe the department is to submit their proposal or plan or something for the Families First Act in October. And if we are to have any kind of input into it, as opposed to this is our plan and we're sending it in tomorrow, to build that in or to see what the draft is. And so we can, whatever, to have a discussion, a presentation and discussion on that.
Oh, we can definitely arrange for a presentation. Beth Salzgill is our lead for the FFPSA. And also in terms of participation, we have a number of work groups and we have a lot of community partner involvement with those work groups. I believe one of the work groups is up to 70 individuals. So we are definitely welcoming input. And I do want to emphasize in terms of Kern Hatton that since it's no longer licensed, there are no DCF children there.
Right.
Presently. Okay.
But there are children there.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, it's the catch-22 paradox. I mean, it just very difficult. Thank you. Thank you. Let me ask you this, Deputy Commissioner. Would it be, since our committee will very definitely want to weigh in one way or another on the Families First, can you give us, is September, August, is August the time to have you come in to provide your draft report, the draft information that you'll be sending along?
It would be definitely September, perhaps even mid-September, because there is such a heavy lift and I know we're going to be pressed up against our October 1st deadline.
But it's October 1st that is the deadline for you.
Mhm.
I'm trying to walk back a little bit and think about time for this committee to hear and digest what you're doing and then perhaps weigh in.
Oh, I see. I was trying to make
Yeah.
sure we had it as complete as possible. That would be more, I'm going to speak for Beth Salzgill, September 1st, around there, so she'd have time to consider and incorporate any ideas.
So that would be August, our August meeting. I think we'll try to put that up on our agenda pretty quickly. And then we'll just keep our ears open and then we may have you come in as well at a September meeting with any final information that you have in your application.
Great. I would
Yeah.
look forward to that.
That would be great. Okay, good. What else, committee? I had Kern Hatton. I have I had child abuse as things that we probably should be looking at. That's
So
a small
can-
area.
just-
Yes, Senator Westman.
I just want to reinforce something that Representative Pugh brought up earlier when Commissioner Brown was there. The number of caseworkers, DCF caseworkers working and what their caseloads were. I know we've had trouble making sure that we met our the standards and the goals of how many caseworkers and how many cases in DCF. We've had trouble doing that. And there is a number of different levels to that because there's supporting groups to that. And depending on what that looks like, I might want to go further than that, but Representative Pugh did bring that up when Commissioner Brown was in, and I think that's very important.
Thank you. Agree. I think we all agree.
We can definitely provide you the numbers. I know we can get a breakdown of like a family services worker per active case by district. So we can absolutely get you that information.
Yeah, but depending on what that looks like, it may bring up issues of training new people. And I know there is support around all of that. There's some levels of that. So I'm really interested in that because that's hard work out in the community. And sometimes that's the work that goes on that helps us from the families and the kids going on to more needy services after that. And that's very important stuff.
Understood.
Thank you.
Just-
Committee, I did have, I did write down the child advocate, Office of Child Advocate. I don't think that's an immediate issue for us to bring up, but I think in one of our meetings going forward that we should hear from Representative Pugh and others. And I keep.
The House unanimously, I think it
I
was close to
know.
unanimously approved it, and it is sitting in the Senate's Rules Committee, which I guess will pop
So
out in January.
It'll pop out in January. So I guess my question is, I know I've had a lot of, I've had some emails from some folks asking us to take it up in this committee. Before you passed it out, I suggested this committee would be the one to do it. But if it's coming to the Senate, I don't know. We may want to have an update on what the child advocate does or does not do. Representative Pugh, I'll leave it to you to advise me on that. We can stay
Let's
in touch.
talk. Sure.
Yeah, glad to do it.
I mean, whatever.
Yeah. Yes, whatever works. And we have enough to do that one might, that one for me was being put off to some of our later meetings. Committee, this is great. I did kind of, is there anything else before we try to wind up or down? Oh, good. All right, we have a lot of things. I've got to go through the things that I've written down, and I know that the clerk is going to be keeping me posted, as will Representative, all of you. I'm not putting Kelly on the spot. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to be a little protective.
Okay. What?
Oftentimes the clerk has a very important job,
Yes.
which is to pull out the roll call when there is a vote. And that is the role of the clerk.
So well, I will keep it as at that level because I think that is the critical role of the clerk. And I'm not asking the clerk to do anything more than that unless the clerk so desires. We're good.
I have to take care of my own.
I know. Okay. But now she's my clerk. She's her own clerk. So I have some tentative times written down for meetings. What we'll do is we'll have Peggy send out a doodle poll. Don't we love those? And the doodle poll will be for July, August, September, October, and possibly November. I just want to take a look at what's available for some dates in those months. And if there's a month where everyone is on vacation, we have room, I think, to skip. We have 6 meetings. This is the first one, so that gives us 5 others. So we may want to, there may be a month that we have to skip because of our own personal schedules.
I realize this will be hard for Peggy or whoever we're getting the information from. Some of well, speaking for myself, my availability at certain meetings may depend upon whether or not it is in Montpelier or whether it is in my dining alcove or so whether it can be remote, whether some of us can be remote or not.
Good point. So we'll try to clarify that. If there's not going to be a vote taken, so for example, if we're not voting on the proposal for the Families First but we're just hearing information, then hopefully we can Zoom. And because I do agree with you, we're better off gathering information. I have no difficulty with Zoom. So I'll talk with leadership, and everyone, please talk with your leadership, and we'll see what we can do. There's no sense in driving 6 hours if you don't have to. And I'm thinking of Senator Sears in particular.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's 2 hours for some of us. And
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's a lot. And it does save the state money. Just to be clear. Okay.
Well, I just, our clerk has a long distance travel also. She lives in Londonderry, so
Oh,
that's
gosh.
not far from,
Yeah. And and people who have jobs are pulled away more as a result. All right. So Peggy, why don't we go off YouTube at this point? We're going to adjourn